Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest. That is clearly not Mark Lieberman. Sorry, HP. No, you're not Mark Lieberman. That is Ethan Roberson. Hell of a horse bracketology, HOH bracketology. The number 2 rated bracketologist among new brackets from the NCAA Tournament last year. That's according to Bracket Matrix. I'm Jack Grossman. This is Floyd Street's Finest, presented or brought to you by the Field of 68 Podcast Network, presented by Title Boxing, where Coach Lieberman gets fit, where when I'm back in Louisville, probably should go. Your first class is free, located 849 South Hurstbourne Parkway. You can call them at 502-630-0600. Again, your first class there is free at Title Boxing. Also presented by Kentucky Branded. Get your UofL stuff. If Cam Drummond's listening, he can get his Kentucky stuff there. Also Kentucky Derby merch as well. But Ethan Roberson, as I'll probably call him a bunch on the podcast, HP, friend of the pod, Cam Drummond, Lexington Herald Leader, and I, we've kind of known each other for a few years now. HB does bracketology, and he's really damn good at it. So that's why we have him on the podcast today. And he is also an absolute Louisville terrorist. So he loves the Cardinals. You can follow him on Twitter at HOH Bracketology. Get all of his bracket stuff and whatever he has to say about Pat Kelsey or Jeff Brom on a given day. I'm at Jack Grossman 97 as well. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff for the podcast. Floyd Street's Finest, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. HB, to start off, before we get into anything else, we're going to find out if my dad, Ken Grossman, actually listens to the podcast today, because he will text me about this. Because I managed on this Thursday evening that we're driving home, I managed to get a traffic ticket on the way home from work, going maybe 2 miles per hour.
Yeah, this is the story here. Like, ignore everything that I'm about to say here on this podcast. Like, the story is Jack Grossman getting the speeding ticket.
It wasn't a speeding ticket.
I'm going to guess there are many people going much faster than Jack Grossman was in the
it was standstill traffic. I have gotten 2 tickets since I moved down to Atlanta, and I've gone a combined 2 miles per hour. I've gotten a ticket at a red stoplight with my car completely stopped, and then I got a ticket in the middle of rush hour today. The first one was about 3 years ago, by the way, but I got a ticket because I was quite literally, ironically, because of the first time I got a ticket. We'll keep this quick because I don't know how many people care about this. I'm angry about this at the moment, because the first time I got the ticket, I was looking up directions how to get back to my apartment, because it wasn't that long after I moved down to Atlanta. I was at a red stoplight. I got pulled over using my phone. Since then, I've been very conscious because of it. The law's done its job for that point. So I'm stuck in traffic. A buddy's texted me. I'm like, fuck it. I'm just going to call him because I don't really want to deal with texting and driving, all that stuff, whatever. So I pull out my phone and call him. And when I do that, the siren starts going off behind me. And I'm like, you've got to be shitting me. and like they come up on the big air horns again, standstill traffic. We're like moving at a crawl here, and goes, can you move to the far right lane and I'm like, sure, whatever. So the cop pulls me over and goes, do you realize what you're doing? I was like, yes, I was calling my friend so that I wouldn't have to text him, so I wouldn't be distracted. And she goes, okay. She takes my license, gives me a ticket. And I'm like, you can't win, man. You just can't win.
This might be a King of the Hill situation where the cop's waiting to pull over, specifically Jack Grossman, every time he goes by the a certain point of Atlanta on the way home from I'm surprised you were working during the day, to be honest with you.
Well, it's not very often. It's not very often.
If it makes you hear from Jack at like 3 a.m. that he's coming home from work when I've been asleep for like 5 hours already. But that's a whole nother thing. They're not here to listen to us talk about your traffic tickets, even though that is the most interesting thing we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so I had to be like, what the hell? State of Georgia, why? 2 tickets, maybe 2 miles per hour total in both of them. That I had to get out of the way. I was angry. So I expect to get on Friday during the day a text from my dad at some point of, why the fuck did you have your phone out? So long the lines there. So
this is the litmus test. Does Ken Grossman, who I've never met before, it's probably kind of strange me calling him Ken Grossman on the pod when I've never met him before, but we know the legend of Ken Grossman.
Yes. Anyways, we're here to talk about Louisville. We're talking about where they're looking at in the NCAA tournament. But before we get to any of that, HB, because I know you got a lot on your chest. You were angry about that Duke game. The state of where Louisville's at right now after that To be quite frank, Coach Lieber and I talked a lot about it earlier in the week. Well, it's an embarrassment up in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Just hasn't gone the way it was supposed to go the last few weeks, especially. And even with Michael Brown back, was not a pretty one up there in Durham.
Yeah, I would love to get like a James Strebel style explosion here. I am not that kind of talker on podcast, unfortunately, but I think
That's
Eric
what you're
Crawford
here for.
is what I'm here for. That's right. I thought Eric Crawford put that extremely well in his article, though, talking about like it was a cold slap in the face that, they're not what we thought they were at all. You get Michael Brown back last Saturday against Virginia Tech, and frankly, the offense is humming. Even defensively, I don't know that Michael Brown individually is making a huge difference for Louisville's defense. Obviously, he sure as hell didn't on Monday. But, defensively, even on Saturday, I thought they played better than they had been in some of these other games. But just the idea that they were a full-strength team, this was the moment. I think people felt real optimism, myself included, for this game. And just the reality hitting you, I think the main thing is that one of the quickest ways to lose people and lose fans as a college basketball or college football coach is put them in a situation that makes them feel like stupid or something like that. Because people were bought back in, man, after getting Michael Brown back. And that, hey, you were the much better team than Duke in the first half, in the first game when you were at home. In the second half, we knew that game was over at, the under 16, the under 12. We knew Duke was going to come back and win this game with relative ease. And in, Monday's game, they were barely in it, man. They looked pathetic. Like, there's no other way to say it. I thought Kelsey looked despondent at the press conference afterwards, not to the point that, like, Mark Pope was a couple months ago against Michigan State, but I think it's a real hard slap in the face for a lot of people. I kind of compare it to how I felt after the Cal football game this year and the Clemson football game when Louisville lost that Clemson game because they got 6 personal fouls in a quarter or whatever it was. And it's like, it gives me real pause about whether Jeff Brom's going to actually end up getting them to the place that you hired him to get them to, which is the college football playoff. And this is the kind of thing where it makes you really question the strength of the whole operation in Louisville. Like, is Pat Kelsey really built for this? Last year was awesome. As I've talked to some of my UK friends about with Mark Pope, year one, when you have, the kumbaya of the new coach, when you have, everyone ready to embrace you, ready to dismiss whatever shortcomings you have, that's the easy part. When the snowball rolls downhill in a positive way, people get bought in relatively easily. But, like, this is where it gets hard now. This is like these jobs, Louisville, Kentucky, Indiana, these are hard jobs. And, a result like that, that's just going to make it even harder, man. So as a fan, it's hard to not be fuming after that. But you did this a couple days late for me to yell and scream on here about it. So that may be another day, though. Hopefully not another day, but maybe another day.
Yeah, hopefully not another day. But right. you never know. But yeah, no, it's definitely been. We're recording this Thursday. You've had some time to matriculate it and not be as wrong with it for sure. But I wanted to get your thoughts, anyways, because you bring that up, and I was hoping you would say this because that's one of the reasons why I'm having you on right now, is because we've had to kind of have that reality check of, okay, this probably isn't a Final Four favorite. That some people, me included, I had them in my Final Four preseason.
Yeah, the exact same Final Four in the preseason.
Yeah, that's when we knew we were crushed.
And of course, none of those teams look like they're going to be Final Four favorites now, except maybe Houston.
Yeah.
But we cursed Purdue, Houston, Louisville, and Kentucky in the preseason. From the moment we tweeted that, it was over for them. So apologies to Pope and Kelsey, but. Yeah, sorry guys.
I promise we're not completely independent of each other. We both went out great. We're screwed immediately, but I bring that up because everything, even without Michael for the 6 weeks they didn't have him, I've been guilty of this as well. I didn't think Michael Brown fixed a lot of the issues on the defensive end. And that's something that has proven to be true the last couple games. And I'm still not ready to fully cave on this argument. I still think the offense will largely be fine. It's mostly he had his worst game of the year at a pretty terrible time to have your worst game of the year. And a lot of that is because of what Duke was doing. And Coach Lieberman and I talked a lot about this earlier the week. You go back and catch that podcast for a full X and O's what went wrong type of podcast there. But in short, because Louisville's defense was so bad, that put them in people love to talk about complimentary football and all that stuff. When Louisville's not getting stops on the defensive end, they're not getting in transition. They're not playing with the pace they want to play with. You're playing at Duke's tempo. You're playing a half court style game. That's going to make everything you want to accomplish on the offensive end a lot harder. Not to mention the fact that Duke is so damn athletic. They're so good on the defensive end. And when you don't have to respect Frew or Khalifa or whoever the hell's playing the 5 spot, that allows you to stay attached to shooters on drivers to help and make sure that Michael Brown's not the guy finishing when he's able to get into the lane, which he was able to get into the lane. I don't know how many teams will be able to actually emulate and execute that game plan the same level Duke did because Duke's so damn elite. But at the same time, the idea of U of L was that they would be able to do that against the top of the sport, which hasn't been the case. So knowing that with that kind of reset we've had now, you're doing this as a really fun, side hustle, for lack of a better term. And you did this very successfully last year. As I said earlier, you were second among new brackets in the bracket matrix last year. That's pretty damn hard to do. That's impressive. So where you're at this year, first of all, we'll start with this. You have the formula. I have no idea exactly what the formula means. I just know that's what inputs your S curve and your bracket and all that stuff. Yeah. So explain the formula and then explain kind of where it has Louisville at this point in time.
Right. I do bracketology a little bit different than you're going to see Joe Lenardi or Mike DeCourcy or the overwhelming majority of people that do this on the internet and post it on Twitter, websites, wherever you want to put them at. I more or less went back. I'd wanted to do this for a while. I have a background in data analysis in some of my past jobs that I did. My first job out of college was actually forecasting for an insurance company how many calls and how many claims we were going to get in a given month and being able to kind of take those and forecast exactly like what kind of workload we're going to have and how many people we're going to need to do it in a given month. There's nothing interesting in being in warranty and figuring out how many claims Best Buy is going to send us in a month. It's kind of fun in like the game within the game way, but like this is not something that I was overly enthusiastic about. But, and ironically, when I was in college and stuff like that, I was terrible at using Excel and those kinds of things. That makes this whole outcome even funnier here. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take the various different metrics that are on the team sheet, of which there's more or less like 6 team ranking metrics, which are divided into results-based metrics, which are the KPI, wins above bubble, and strength of record metrics, the predictive metrics, which are BPI, Ken Palm, and Bart Torvik, the net ranking, which is sort of supposed to be a hybrid of the two. It leans a little bit toward the predictive metrics as far as like how it actually works now. And, your general record, your quad rankings, that kind of thing. So like what I do is I put all of those inputs in the formula, and basically I based the power ranking that the formula spits out off of the correlations between each different statistic and including like records within each different quad, the correlations between your ranking within each of those statistics with the actual outcomes of the seeds. So just as an example for anyone at home following along, if the net was to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and every team in the top 10 of the net, they finished in their exact top 10 spot on the actual seed list. So the number 1 team was number 1, the number 2 team of the net was the number 2 overall seed, and on and on. That would be 100% correlation. That is not how it works for the most part, but it'd be very nice if it did. Basically, I measured that out to kind of find out exactly how the committee weights each of these metrics, combine it all together, and sort of like throw it all on the pile and like power rate it, average it out. And that is how the formula sort of determines like how good a team is in the eyes of the committee. It's not perfect. I finished 18th last year out of everyone that did this, which is about 250, 275 entries. So it went pretty well. Probably didn't explain it great for the people at home, but like that's the best I can probably do for right now. As far as Louisville goes right now, their power rating number right now is 403 out of, I think the top team right now is about 680. in the power ranking at the moment. Last year, a number of 403 would have put you at about a middle or high 8 seed on the season last year. Obviously, this is subject to change because of the fact that when they win different quad games, whether it be quad 1, 2, 3, or 4 games, I add points into their overall power rating every time they win a quad game. They can also lose points if a quad 1 game were to become a quad 2 game. So it really is very fluid at all different times. So Louisville right now is pretty close between the first 7 seed and the second 7 seed. I think it's important to kind of look at them from the perspective of a team. They're sort of a Dollar General version of what Houston was in January last year. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as Houston, the basketball team, was last year. But just for the sake of broad strokes comparisons here, Houston was a team that had very strong predictive metrics in the top 5 pretty much the entire season of KenPom and Torvik. But it was like January last year, and they didn't have a single quad 1 win until pretty late in the year. And as they kind of chugged along and accumulated more and more in Big 12 play, they were able to move up all the way to the number 3 overall seed. Louisville is in a much less strong position than they were, obviously, because Houston was a bona fide top 5 team, regardless of how many quad 1 wins they have. But Louisville is strong analytically in predictive metrics. Like KenPom, for example, top 20, I think 18 or 19. Torvik, pretty similar story, 18 or 19. BPI has them a little bit higher. It's been very high on Louisville pretty much the entire season. So this is a team that has clearly shown that it's been better than the average bubble team and really most of the middle of the road tournament type teams that they've played. But they've had an 0-5 quad 1A record, which is a top half of quad 1 win, a top 15 team at home, a top 25 team neutral, or a top 37 team on the road. So their results-based metrics and their quad records are not doing them much good in the formula right now.
No, it's not. And the other thing I'd compare it to Houston, that's the big difference right now, is Houston in the Big 12 last year, they had a lot of chances to get those marquee signature type wins. Louisville still has 6 quad 1 games left because the ACC is much, much better than it was last year, where it really hurt Louisville on the seed line. And even of those 6 quad 1 games, 4 of them are quad 1A games. So Louisville has opportunities to help itself. However, it's not the same boat as, let's say, again, a Houston was last year, where you could beat an Iowa State or a Kansas, well, not Kansas last year, an Iowa State or a Texas Tech, and get really top of the line wins. Even Louisville's quad 1A opportunities. North Carolina's a really good team. They've been up and down a little bit recently. Clemson's fine. SMU's fine. Miami's fine. Those are all games that can really, really help you, but they're not the type of games that are going to go and say, holy crap, they just beat Duke, or they beat a Houston, or they beat a Nebraska or a Michigan or something like that. It's a lot of those, even with it being quad 1A, kind of a mid-tier-ish type system, to where I'll ask that because Louisville, which also, again, worth noting, because Kentucky got waxed so bad on Tuesday night, as everyone, including us, to be honest, were laughing at it. They dropped they dropped 5 spots in the net, and that right now is not a quad 1 win anymore for Louisville. That's not helping them as much as it was even a week ago. So that's something to monitor as well. Cal, their other 2 quad 1 wins. Cal's 56 in the net, so that, as long as that stays in the top 75, they should be fine. Indiana, even though they're mostly a paper tiger, did pick up a big win over Purdue. So they're 32nd, so you're feeling pretty good about them being in the top 50 for a quad 1 win. So you want those teams to stay that as well. Would be rivalry aspect aside. If Kentucky wins a couple more games, gets back within that top 30, that would help too. But Louisville, they can control their own destiny from the 6 quad 1 games, the 4 quad 1A games, and whatever the heck they would do in the ACC tournament. But because they don't have that top of the line type opportunity left on the schedule, how much could they theoretically climb when it comes to seed lines and stuff like that?
Yeah, this is a question I was thinking about quite a bit before you asked me to come on the show the other day, because it's really hard to estimate this because of a couple things, really.
Yep.
You don't want to fall into doing this bracketology thing with poll logic in mind of oh, this team won today, this team lost today. they could be right next to each other. Louisville could pick up a big win. And I think the team ahead of them right now is Clemson, and Clemson could lose. That doesn't necessarily mean Louisville's going to jump them in the seed
Yeah,
lines
and
right now.
people love to do that, especially during like conference tournament week.
Yes.
Like you
The
see that
biggest trap to fall
every
into.
single game, and they're overreacting and saying it means all. It's like, no, that's just one within the 30 data points. Yes,
That's
it helps
100%
you.
fair.
It helps you. It you certainly would rather win the game and get the big win or avoid the bad loss, whatever case it may be. But it's not as simple as like last year. Well, Louisville beat Clemson in the semifinals, so Louisville should be a higher seed than Clemson. That's not how it works.
Yes. I think with Louisville's sort of ceiling here, I'm completely throwing out 1 seed. I'm completely throwing out 2 seed. There are teams ahead of them that have just separated to the point of, this year in college basketball is fascinating because there are so many teams that deep into the season, we have 2 undefeated teams. We have multiple one-loss teams. We have numerous 1 or 2 loss teams to a shocking degree that we have not seen in years. And I think a lot of that is because of how good this freshman class. There is so much next level talent that these big programs have been able to augment with, these great transfer portal gets. You get a guy like Yaxel at Michigan, who has been just awesome for them. And then you augment, he's not a freshman, so really bad example by me, but you augment him with guys like an Elliot Cadeau from North Carolina, a Morez Johnson from Illinois.
But like even
Morez
like
Johnson,
a Trey McKinney's come on really
yeah,
big for
that's
Michigan the
exactly
last
right.
month or so.
That's
Yeah, and
exactly
he's a
right.
freshman.
And
Yeah.
it's very top heavy this year, but it's also a double-edged sword in a good way for Louisville in that like those teams aren't giving out many wins this year. And even if Louisville does not get a win against one of those teams, I don't expect many teams in the middle of the bracket right now to like rack up wins against Michigan, Duke, Nebraska, as insane as that is to say, UConn, teams along those lines. So to answer your question, to actually get to what you're asking here, I'd throw out 1 seed. I'd throw out 2 seed. Top 3, high 3 seed would be extremely difficult. We can talk high 3 seed if they were to like go undefeated the rest of the way or something like that no one expects them to do. Like if we're being completely honest with ourselves, given with the shortcomings they've shown against Duke and some of the other top teams they played over the past few weeks, I think a realistic goal that includes them losing some games would be something along the lines of like a 4 seed. I think that's a reasonable goal that they could potentially get to. Again, you talked about it earlier. They have 6 quad 1 games. The SMU game could very easily become a quad 1 game, even though it's currently a quad 2 game. You have 4 quad 1A wins on the schedule. But I think what really helps Louisville is that even though they're 0-5 in quad 1A games over the past 3 months of the season, they get a lot juicier opportunities coming up in the way that, like, I think these are very winnable quad 1 and quad 1A games. It is a completely different animal to slay the Dragon of Duke in Cameron Indoor Stadium as opposed to going to Clemson this year. Ironically, Louisville's got a better record at Cameron than they do at Little John, but let's throw that out for the purpose of this exercise here. So,
Yeah, I mean, like no one's going to sit there and say, "Yeah, yeah, the record is what it is, so they're not winning at Little John." It's like, no, it's Little John versus Cameron, guys. Like, come on.
that's right.
It's no offense
That's
to
right.
Little John, but it's just not Cameron.
It's kind of crazy because Gonzaga might lose 1 game and be a 3 seed, man. That's how strong it is at the top right now. A top of the line 3 seed might be a Gonzaga. You've got teams like a BYU. Purdue's kind of slipping a bit, so I don't know if I'd put them in there. But, I think very high ceiling case where they go like 10-1 to end the season. We can talk like a middle to low 3 seed. Realistically, I think Louisville's goal should be a 4 seed going forward. We'll see where they end up, honestly. It's fascinating because they blew all of their chances against the top teams on the schedule. But at the same time, they have opportunities to get on paper good wins against teams that are a lot easier to beat, in my opinion, than the ones they've lost to. And really, for all the criticism that Pat Kelsey has deservedly gotten for their performance against Tennessee and Virginia and Arkansas in both Duke games, he's been really good against decent teams, average teams, bad teams, even just regular old good teams. So I think they're in a really interesting spot as far as that going forward. So, I don't know how much you'd like a 4 seed this year. The 1 bid leagues, I don't think are overly strong this year. If you can avoid, either a a Miami of Ohio is the obvious one, or maybe a
St.
Yale
Louis.
or anything. St. Louis is a little different. I think they're going to be like a 7, 6, 7, 8 seed, but or like an A10 champion. I can't remember. The Tony Skins team's playing really well in that
Yeah.
conference right now,
Yeah,
but
Dayton's still sitting there, also that they've struggled a little bit more lately.
right. But that's a conversation
Yeah.
for a month from now. But yeah, I mean, they're in an interesting spot though. One thing I think is important to kind of mention is that I see people kind of say this every time they lose. They are far off from like just make the tournament being a real concern for them right now.
The
And I
Cam
know
Drummond bad faith arguing.
it's the Cam Drummond special. That's right.
Yes.
It's the Cam Drummond special. When I look at that, I think it is important to say for Louisville, just in terms of making the tournament, and I hate that we're having this conversation. It shows that the season has not been what they wanted it to be. They've beaten Virginia Tech, who's a bubble team, convincingly. They beat Cal by 20, bubble team, convincingly. Beat Indiana convincingly, also a bubble team. They beat Kentucky by 9, who's probably, I have them currently as an 8 seed at the moment. So, they've shown the ability to beat those mediocre teams we're kind of filling out the field with. So I wouldn't be concerned about that unless they go into total free fall at this point.
Right. And the only way that happens is if, quite frankly, as you mentioned, they do things that they haven't done very often, if ever, during the Pat Kelsey era. The only time I can think of them really losing to a team that's like, ooh, that team's worse than them is when they lost at Georgia Tech last year.
With you in attendance.
Yes, with me in attendance. Hey, look, they're 3-0 in the games I've been at this year, so I've redeemed myself a little bit. After last season, I saw them twice in person. It was the Ole Miss game and the Georgia Tech game. I was like,
excellent choices there.
Yeah, very well done on my part.
Floyd Street's finest. Put them on I don't know who does Field 68 have an Indiana podcast? I have no idea.
House of Hoosier.
There you go. Put them on that podcast.
But Louisville only has 3 quad 3 games remaining the rest of the year. They're all at home. You would think they would be able to take care of Syracuse at home, Notre Dame at home, and Georgia Tech at home. But if they were to, if they're losing any of those games, we're having completely different conversations. But if they were to lose 1 or 2 of those and lose all the quad 1 games, then yeah, no, that's a very different situation that you're looking at in Louisville. Right. But I'm with you in terms of they've proven when they're the better team, they win the basketball game. That's one thing that Pat Kelsey's really done a good job of demonstrating as the Louisville head coach, to where I would expect him to win those 3 quad 3 games. They have 2 quad 2 games as well. SMU at home, then Baylor on a neutral side. Baylor's not very good. They should win that game.
About that game all the time.
It's a weird game. I like the idea of it. I would rather that be the Kentucky game in that spot. Of course, Louisville fans are probably just happy that it's over and they won the game already and have the bragging rights, whatever. But yeah, I like the idea. In execution, Baylor's not great this year. They are. I will say the one thing I'll say about, and this is 2 weeks from now, so we'll get into this a lot more. Baylor's very athletic. They got some dudes that can break you down off the dribbles. So Louisville's going to have to do a better job than they've done recently defending that, and that's something they're going to have to do on Saturday. It's SMU too, Boopy Miller, those guys as well. 2 games that they should win, but could get iffy there if you have some struggles defensively. And then, as you said, you got the 6 quad 1 games.
Yep.
Yeah, so it'll be fascinating. So you have Kentucky, I guess, or we'll just say with Louisville high end 4 right now. You got them as a 7. If they sputter out a little bit, again, I think they're going to be in the tournament, barring an absolute free fall. Like, that's not a hot take. That's not really even an interesting or a sexy take. That's just kind of a fact at this point, as long as again, they don't self-destruct there. If they were to lose the majority of these quad 1 games and then take just take care of their business in these quad 2, quad 3 games, will they end up in that kind of that 7-8 range?
Yeah, again, it's hard to say because you don't know what's happening around them at a given time.
And I know that it's an unfair loaded question, but it's January 29th, so that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. It would be very difficult for me to see them slipping into Dayton or something along those lines. Like you said, they would have to do things that they have not done really at any point in the Pat Kelsey era, which is lose to teams they are clearly superior to up to this point in the season. So, I think that's a conversation. Another prism to kind of look at this through would be what if they lose these games because Michael Brown gets hurt and he doesn't come back? That's like a whole nother like can of worms.
Well,
That was
there's also the can of worms of if they start playing better. Not that they have bad losses when he was gone, but how do you view the games when he was gone if he comes back and he is back now but plays well? How does that get filtered into it also?
yeah. My model is not perfect, obviously, because I was number 18 and not number 1 last year, but you really have no idea. When the UNC athletic director goes on there in last year and he starts talking like, why did West Virginia get left out? And he starts talking about Tucker DeVries. I was like, wait a second, Tucker DeVries last played in like late
He played
November,
8 games
December.
last year. He played
It's the,
8 games.
it's the problem of the committee system more than anything else of things like that I cannot really quantify. You know, that's totally arbitrary. There's no, and the average, I don't know who's chairing the committee this year.
Hopefully not Bubba Cunningham.
Who's that?
Hopefully not Bubba Cunningham.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Hopefully not Bubba. Hopefully
Yeah.
not Mitch Barnhart again. Those were Bubba Cunningham and Mitch Barnhart. Those were two haymakers of committee chairs in recent years.
Really were.
But it's totally arbitrary how they choose to enforce those things with because last year, Louisville got an 8 seed. It was shocking to me. My model had them as a 6 seed. There were 2 teams that missed big time on, Memphis and Louisville, which I think everyone missed big time on. So again, these are people in a room. They're not watching every game. Jack Grossman, who sits in front of me right now, is watching far more college basketball than anyone on the committee is watching right now. So, it kind of is what it is, man. It could go in a multitude of different directions how they choose to weight things.
Yeah.
I will say this. I will mention this as far as like an interesting fact for fans at home to like watch if you're really into like the statistics and the bracket math of it all. Wins above bubble last year had the highest correlation of any stat on the team sheet in the last 5 years by an absolute mile. It was not even close how much more they leaned on wins above bubble than any statistic over the past 4 years that I've tracked. Most of the time, your nets, your strength of record, they tend to like a little bit more than the other results-based metrics, but your Ken Palms, your Torviks, all of that stuff. If one has a really good year, like they really leaned on this statistic a lot, usually it was like a 73% correlation or so with where your final seed outcome was. WAB was 90% last year, which is unbelievable. It was the first year they used wins above bubble as a statistic, and it was really the primary thing they leaned on to a shocking extent. I think it was really funny when Bubba Cunningham went on there and he was like, yeah, we use Bart Torvik a lot as one of the new ones. And I look at the correlations between seed outcomes, and Bart Torvik was literally the worst one of all the correlations.
So Carolina had a high Torvik rating. That's what we're hearing.
Carolina had great metrics overall last year relative to the bubble team.
They didn't use WAD for Carolina because they didn't have any wins above teams on the bubble.
That's right. Yeah.
But it isn't a coincidence considering it was the first year they used WAB. They probably wanted to really emphasize it. We'll see how much that continues. If you remember the first year they had the net, it was very strict, like we are following the net almost to a T type of deal. So we'll see committee to committee having it more involved now. If it'll be the same way again this year, you just never know. Let me ask you this though, because last year the ACC crushed Louisville in terms of trying to get quality wins. It hurt them at least 2 seed lines, I would argue, and all that stuff. This year, ACC is much better, as we've talked about already. It's not what the Big 12 is. It's not what the Big 10 is. I think the top is much better than what the SEC is, but the SEC is probably a bit deeper. But it's not elite like we're used to the ACC traditionally being. Like it's the 3rd, 4th-ish best conference this year, as opposed to being like the 6th last season or the last few seasons. So I don't think it's going to significantly help Louisville, especially that they don't have that win over Duke. Maybe they beat them in the ACC conference tournament. I don't see it though at this stage, but I think it's almost like a net neutral for the league, how it's going to help or hurt Louisville this year, which is probably, even though I just called it a net neutral, a positive compared to what it's been for not just Louisville, but ACC teams as a whole the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good read on it, that it won't particularly help or hurt Louisville. When I look at how the formula ranks teams in the Big Ten and the Big 12, they have a lot of those teams that rank very high in the power rankings. In the first three lines of the Big 12 alone, you've got Arizona, who's undefeated right now. You've got Iowa State, who's lost a couple games, but still a damn good basketball team, like without any sort of doubt. You got BYU, you got AJ DeBonsa on that team, a really fun team to watch there. In the Big Ten, you have Michigan, who might, even though they've lost a game, they might be the best team in the country still. You can very easily argue that. You've got
They
Purdue,
didn't
who's
peak too
lost a
early.
couple games.
They didn't peak too early.
Huh? Might want to ask Big Blue Cam about that one. But
Gibbs catching so many strays on this. It's honestly it was predictable. It was completely predictable. I'm going to be honest.
But the Big Ten, you've got Michigan, you've got Michigan State, you've got some really good teams in the middle. I like Iowa a lot. Illinois is another top team. We're talking like three teams on the top two lines or four teams on the top two lines. That's awesome for the Big Ten. The ACC does not have that. It's really Duke alone at the top. Again, Duke might be the best team in the country. That's great for the league and the ACC as a whole. It's much more teams kind of congregating on that 5, 6, 7, 8 line, where Louisville's gonna have a lot of chances to get good wins. UNC at UNC, that's probably Pat's best chance to get a quote unquote signature win this year, just due to UNC's brand and kind of the allure of winning at the Dean Dome.
That's a bad matchup, though.
They're not. It's not like Duke. I think Virginia would have been a much more impressive win this year as well, relative to UNC. But again, I think it gives Louisville good opportunities to move up if they take care of business. I think Louisville sort of build as a team, which I hate talking about them like this because, no one is excited to have basketball James Franklin as their as like leading the charge for the most part. And it's going to be up to Pat to shake the primetime Pat Kelsey label that people are kind of starting to bestow on him. But I think for Louisville's build, I think I would lean toward the ACC slightly helping them because, they win a lot against these middle of the road teams, and they're going to get those chances against Clemson, UNC, away games. I think the Wake Forest game is technically a quad one game on the road, which is ridiculous for the quad one system. That's a whole nother rant, how ridiculous the quads are. And how much
it is, because Wake Forest is 67th in net. That's utterly ridiculous. But again, topic for another
Miami
day.
On the road. That's a game I would, even if it's on the road, I would expect Louisville to win that game. I think they're better than Miami, but again, it's a good opportunity for them in terms of just on paper, team sheet type of opportunities. So, net neutral's probably correct. I lean a little bit more toward it being positive just based on how Louisville, the kind of teams they've excelled against and the teams they've struggled against. But again, no way to tell until we actually get there, I guess.
Yeah. Last thing before we get you out of here. The rivalry aspect, everything always comes back to Louisville and Kentucky. There's been, again, our buddy Cam Drummond, Lexington Herald leader, does great stuff there. C Drummond 97. We'll give him the shout out on Twitter. Go ahead and give him the follow there. But Cam keeps trying to drag Louisville down to the muck with Kentucky. It's just not the same. It's about a seed line difference, so they are closer than what probably Louisville fans want to admit. But just what's your read right now on Kentucky in terms of making the tournament? What type of seed line that they can see come March?
Kentucky's very interesting because they started the season and really for the first month and a half of the season as very, very strong in predictive metrics. Just again, to reiterate for the viewers and the listeners at home, Louisville has been excellent in KenPom and Bart Torvik and BPI, mostly because of how dominant they have been against teams that they are clearly better than. Kentucky started the year in a very similar vein in like hanging around that top 20, that top 25, in spite of the fact that they really didn't beat anyone for a very long time during the season and lost a lot of games. But they've really slipped into the 30s, the 40s, and these predicted metrics. I think that's largely due to that tough loss at home to Missouri, really getting shellacked by Alabama and Vanderbilt the other night. And overall, the computers do not see Louisville and Kentucky as terribly similar teams in the predictive metrics. Results-based metrics, I have not paid as much attention to be honest. I'm not sure exactly how they see Kentucky relative to Louisville, but it makes sense that there would be a bit of a gap between Louisville and Kentucky in those on seed line based on those predictive metrics here. I think Kentucky, warts and all, they're a strong bet to make the tournament right now, and I would be pretty surprised if they were to fall out of the tournament field at this point. Just as an example, they got a pretty nice win against St. John's on a neutral court in December. That's really big because St. John's keeps winning. I think St. John's in the end might be a little bit lower of a seed line than you might expect because they're going to get hosed by how bad the Big East is and the fact that it's very similar to how the ACC is last year. There's a lot of empty calories in that conference. Kentucky also got the win against Indiana at home. Again, nothing special there. Indiana, I think, maybe slightly above the bubble at the moment, but that's a team that Kentucky showed they were better than.
Really, you have them in right now. That's surprising. I think Indiana has a lot of work to do. I know the metrics like Indiana. They got a lot of work to do though.
I could very well be wrong on that because it's very heavily factoring in on the fact that Indiana has very strong metrics in, pretty much all of the predictives that we use to seed the NCAA tournament field. Only 2-7 against quad 1 and 2 though. So that's going to have to come up, and their results-based metrics, to be honest, are very poor at the moment.
Yeah.
I think at this point they have a pretty good WAB, which is helping them a lot. I would have to look that up again just to make sure, to be honest with you. But, Indiana is a decent win for Kentucky. It's a win that shows that Kentucky is better than a team that is, kind of on the borderline of making the field here.
Right. When you talk about wins above bubble, you're talking about Indiana.
Yeah,
it's what's above Indiana. What's their 47th in WAB, by the way? Kentucky's 28th. So Kentucky.
47th in WAB. Okay, I got those two mixed up then. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but I think
but Indiana is ahead of Kentucky in net and KenPom, that type of stuff.
Just kind of looking at last four in type teams here. Ohio State took a terrible loss to Pitt earlier in the season and hasn't done a whole lot this year. UCLA, they got the big win over Purdue, but I'm sure Mick Cronin will find something else to whine about in his next press conference.
They beat Purdue and he still whined.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Only Mick Cronin could pull that off. NC State really struggled in the non-conferences behind Kentucky. Georgia, I think a fine team. I think Kentucky is a pretty good bet to make the tournament right now. They are closer at this point to the bubble, I think, than they are to really climbing into a 6 or 5 spot right now, at least based on the calculations that I've got right in front of me here. But again, we're talking about teams like Texas on the bubble who Kentucky did beat, teams along those lines. So I don't know, man. This is a whole different conversation, really. For we're talking about mediocre teams really being better than other mediocre teams, but no,
that's the bubble, baby.
That's the bubble every year, man. That's why they're on the bubble, though. We're not doing historically weak bubble on this show because they're on the bubble for a reason. That's because they're not very good. So
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. They obviously got a lot of chance in the SEC as well. Kind of similar spot to Louisville, except they go to Arkansas on Saturday. So that'll be. John Calipari will have him ready to go. That's one thing we've learned about one John Vincent Calipari.
The Emperor doesn't play around in those rivalry games, man. I think that's one of his best attributes as a coach is he knows exactly just the right amount of amped up to get his team. It's unbelievable, man. It feels like he's undefeated in those games. It really does. I bet he lost the Cal so many times.
I bet the knee. I bowed down to him after the Louisville Arkansas game this year. I was like, I'm done doing it because in the last calendar year he did that. Right. He beat Kentucky and Rupp Arena with an 0-5 record in the league, and he beat Pitino in the NCAA tournament in a calendar year. I'm like, I'm done. When he has a personal vendetta, it's over. He's not losing the game.
2011 message board. Jack Grossman is
soul crushed. Yeah. Young Jack Grossman who fought the battle for 15 years of John Calipari sucks. It's over. Guys, it's over. We're done. Right. This actually came up at work today. I was talking to someone about it. I was like, I waved the white flag, man. It's over. It's done. He's good. But anyways, that's all we got for today. Thanks so much again for HP Ethan Roberson for joining the podcast. Again, follow him on Twitter at HOH Bracketology. He'll have all that good stuff about the brackets getting up to Selection Sunday, and he will be spouting out a bunch of Louisville-related content as well. HP's always hot and heavy about the Cardinals there. But HB, appreciate the time, man. We'll catch up. I'll be in Louisville in a couple weeks, so we'll catch up then. Get
Little
old
meet up
Cam
in
Drum.
Louisville.
Yeah,
That
yeah, a
sounds like a
little
good
bit of
time.
Louisville.
We'll
Yeah,
get We'll get Lexington Cam to come
yeah.
up for a little for some good food in Louisville, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe who
yeah.
knows?
I mean, he's due for a Louisville trip. He's there every other week anyway. So
Yeah, I mean it's the weekly Louisville trip, man. If there's one thing about Cam, he's going to talk about how much he hates Louisville, but he'll be back in a week. So
yep,
appreciate you having me on the show,
yep.
though, Jack. It was a good
Appreciate
time
it,
to
man.
talk about my funny side hobby here and talk a little cards with you.
Yep, and we'll do it again as we get closer to the tournament.